Should you pull for Arciela and Kain? Arciela's roles are a support, battery, healer, disable, and dispel. Her attacks: Ascension and Expunge Magic, her skill 1, deals 6 split HP attacks, increasing her Brave by 50% of the HP damage dealt, healing the party to max, dispelling all enemy buffs, cancelling any active Dissension buff, and granting Ascension for 10 turns. Dissension and Sight Unseen, her skill 2, deals 6 HP attacks with all 50% splash, cancelling any active Ascension, granting Ascension for 10 turns, inflicting 30% max Brave and speed down for 6 turns, as well as inflicting group HP attack disable for 2 turns. This also upgrades her HP command to Darkest Hour. Darkest Hour, her skill 2 HP variant, deals 9 HP attacks with 150% splash, filling her EX gauge by 10%. Her skill 1 also gives another version of her HP command, but personally I'm not really a big fan of it and I don't see myself using it very much, so I don't think it's that important to her kit. Moving on to her EX, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Something Vengeance deals 8 split HP attacks, healing the party by 30% of the max HP, granting party Brave by 20% of the HP damage dealt, and granting the buff Heirloom for 6 turns. Unceasing Dread, her LD, deals 7 AoE HP attacks, increasing her skill 2 uses by 1, extending Arciela's debuffs by 1 turn, and inflicting group capacity break for 8 turns. Her C65, I'm gonna go over this briefly, is Ability Recovery Attack All, is an instant turn rate attack that increases both of her skill uses by 1. Happy Cooking, her FR, it is a non-attacking instant turn rate move that heals the party by 80% of the max HP, and if there's any excess healing, you can overheal by 30%. Dignified Awe, her BT, this is the real kicker in her kit. The effect will last 6 turns, giving a party HP cap up of 30%, but it also will not make any of Arciela's debuffs decrease turns, the enemies cannot grant themselves buffs, and the party will receive additional HP damage 16% on every HP attack. Arciela's buffs and debuffs: Ascension will give a max Brave up by 40%, a party initial Brave up by 40%, and a party Brave regen by 40% of the initial Brave. Dissension will give her max Brave up by 40% as well, but also an all enemy speed down by 10%. Heirloom will give another max Brave up by 40% and give the party another Brave regen by 100% of the initial Brave. Capacity Break, her debuff, will make it so enemies cannot gain Brave. However, this will exclude any stolen and natural initial Brave recovery. Arciela's Force Conditions: you get a 40% when there are no enemy buffs and a 40% when any enemy is debuffed. Is Arciela's BT necessary? It is a must-have in my opinion. What makes her an extremely good support is from her BT, her party additional damage effect, her indefinite debuffs, and the enemies being unable to grant themselves any buffs. So you can still provide good healing and battery for your team like a standard support unit would, but you miss most of her best and unique mechanics by not giving her the green. If you plan on using her as a main party unit, definitely get her BT. It is highly necessary. Moving on to Kain, his roles are a ranged attacker, off turn, and jump evasion. Jump 3 increases his Brave by 150% of his own attack and 50% of his own current Brave, and then it is a high turn rate move that deals 6 HP attacks with 350% splash, granting Soaring Bolt for 8 turns. Gungnir, his skill 2, increases his Brave by 300% of his own attack, and it is also a high turn rate attack that deals 9 HP attacks, granting 30% max Brave up for 6 turns. Fang and Claw, his EX, increases his Brave by 200% of his own attack, then deals 7 HP attacks with 750% splash. This move will also launch, extending any active buffs by 1 turn and delaying all enemies by 1 turn. Rising Dive, his LD, increases his Brave by 100% of his own attack, grants 4 levels of his Overhead Inner Dragon, then it is an instant turn rate move that deals 9 HP attacks with 4 100% splash, increasing his skill uses by 1 turn. With the Overhead Inner Dragon, at level 4 he gains access to double jump his Brave command. It is a half turn rate move that extends all of his buffs by 1 turn, filling his EX gauge by 20% and makes it so Kain jumps into the air. While he's in the air, by the way, he cannot be hit with anything. He doesn't even get hit by guaranteed attacks. In a way, this is like true evasion. While he's in midair, he also gains access to his off-turn damage, which is called Lancet. This will trigger after every single turn that passes. It doesn't have to necessarily be an attack or even your own move. Enemies can be taking up turns and Kain will still be dealing that off-turn damage as well. This deals 2 split HP attacks and not consuming any of his Brave. On returning from midair, you will get landing damage as well. This will deal a total of 7 split HP attacks, granting party Brave by 20% of the HP damage dealt, and reducing 4 levels of his inner dragon overhead. Cross jump, his FR, it is an instant turn rate move that launches, granting allies brave by 30% of the HP damage dealt, and while it is active, whenever you break or attack a broken enemy, you're getting a party HP cap up of 50%. Dragoon's Pride, his BT, lasts for 8 turns, it's very simple, gives a party HP cap up of 30% and another 20% HP cap up for himself. Kain's buffs and debuffs, Soaring Bolt will give a max brave up by 50%, and his overhead inner dragon increases 1 level for each turn that Kain takes, also gives him an extra 20% HP cap up. Kain's force conditions, you get a 5% whenever you're using a ranged ability including off-turn damage, a 5% whenever the enemy is launched, a 15% when Kain uses a ranged ability including off-turn, and a 50% when you're breaking or attacking a broken target. Is Kain's BT necessary? His BT will give him an extra 50% HP cap up when active, with some good extra support auras sprinkled in. It doesn't really change his inherent function, which is jumping in the air and attacking with Lancet every turn. Ideally, you would want to get and max his BT for the most optimal damage, but if you're very hurt for resources at the moment and want to save your BT materials for someone else, Kain with just an FR for now will still be okay. Both breakdowns out of the way, let's get to the should you pulls. Should you pull for Arciela? Let's get to what she does really well. What most people are going to be talking about with Arciela is her party additional damage effect with her BT. The difference between party additional damage and a regular party HP cap up, Arciela's effect is multiplicative. Since Arciela has a 16% additional damage, basically multiply all your damage by 1.16. That's what it means by multiplicative. If it was just regular HP cap ups, you would have a significantly lower increase in damage. Another big thing with Arciela is her indefinite debuffs. Sometimes with characters that have an indefinite debuff effect in their BT, like Yuffie, it's not really that broken because Yuffie's debuffs by themselves are not super impressive. Arciela, on the other hand, has some pretty hefty debuffs on her, one of which is a framed 30% speed down. She also has capacity break, which stops most brave gains. Again, keep in mind it's still excluding initial brave recovery, but for most cases, you're still going to be stopping a lot of the enemy's brave recovery, which is nice. One other thing I like about her is HP disabling. Now, this might not be used as much because remember that she also has speed down in her kit, so the enemy is not going to be moving as much. Another thing that's cool with Arciela is she is the demon of enemy buffs. Not only does her BT bring enemy buff prevention, where they straight up just can't provide any buffs at all. If they do provide buffs and Arciela's BT isn't on, that's okay, because she still has access to consistent dispelling with her skill 1. I think that's really cool. At any point in the fight, Arciela does have a way to get rid of enemy buffs. And lastly, with Arciela, if you need someone still with a generic FR, Arciela can give that to you. All the force conditions, she basically takes care of herself. If her BT is active, yeah, guaranteed to be getting 80% on everything. I wouldn't necessarily say this is a top tier FR because she doesn't bring any FR cap ups with her, but if you're facing lockout fights or fights that you can only bring certain type of characters in and you still need a generic FR, Arciela can still do the job. On the downsides of Arciela, there are a number of them. Her BT at its strongest, and you want it at its strongest, relies on the enemy having 8 debuffs on them. All of their 8 slots need to be filled with debuffs, and she cannot do that by herself, unfortunately. Don't worry, it doesn't make her trash because you can always find some other ways to debuff the enemy, be it your other party members or calls. It's not hard at all to reach 8 debuffs. For newer players, this might be a bit of an issue, but for mediumly experienced to veteran players, this is no problem to deal with at all. What is an issue though is if the enemy regularly cleanses themselves, that's a big yikes because you're gonna have to inflict all of those debuffs again if you want Arciela's strongest BT effect. And it's very unlikely that you'll be able to give the enemy 8 gold frame debuffs, so enemy cleansing is always going to be a thing you need to watch out for when you use Arciela. Not a whole lot of enemies cleanse nowadays, but rest assured they will pop up every now and then, and you got to be ready for that if you really like using Arciela. I don't like that she has a short BT effect. Yes, I get it. Party additional damage, indefinite debuffs, buff prevention, but listen, it still doesn't warrant 6 turns in my opinion. It's very short. I think 8 would have been a good number. And before you say, oh no, 8 turns will be too broken, listen, Iris, her BT effect lasts for 8 turns. I don't want to hear nothing. All right, last con I gotta say, even as a support unit, her on-turn damage isn't the greatest. I will say though, she's not supposed to be in your party for her on-turn damage. If you brought her onto your party because you wanted her to be a DPS unit, I don't know what to tell you, buddy. But the reason why, in my opinion, this isn't as bad, she provides so much value outside of damage. You know, her debuffs, her buff preventing, very strong healing, brave recoveries, her brave regen that she gives the party. Also, the additional damage effect is really good. That, in my opinion, helps compensate the fact that her on-turn damage isn't the best. Overall, I think she's a very good pull. I personally will be gemming her, possibly pitying her. I probably will pity her knowing my luck. Let me know your guys' plans for my girl Arciela. Moving on to Kain. Should you pull for Kain? He has a lot going for him, in my opinion. Now, let me just say this straight from the gate. He's not going to be breaking the game for you. He's not going to be off-turn Rufus. He's not going to be doing damage like Astos. But what makes Kain still appealing to me is the fact that he's just very, very solid in most scenarios. He's a very versatile unit. You can fit him into almost any team you want. Defensive, offensive. With the way he works, you can use him in almost any fight. First, with his off-turn damage. Yes, you're dealing 2 split HP attacks. Someone like Sisney deals 6 with her BT active. But remember that this isn't just triggered with your moves. This is also triggered with enemy moves. Every single turn that passes, Kain's Lancet will be triggering. That's why his off-turn damage is very versatile, because no matter what happens in the fight, if a turn passes, he's going to be dealing off-turn damage. His Lancet isn't only consistent, but it's very reliable. When I started using him, when his FR and BT came out, I really liked how easy it was to hit for max damage. Remember that his Lancet doesn't consume any of his Brave, so you're just going to be dealing Brave damage all the time. You're going to be stacking up Brave all the time. After a couple turns, even if the enemy you're fighting has incredibly big Brave reductions, Kain with his Lancet giving himself support, as well as him just stacking up Brave, you're still going to be hitting high numbers with Kain. And thankfully with his FR boards, they made his FR actually good. His FR isn't garbage anymore, thank goodness, because that was easily his biggest problem when his FR first came out. It was so bad. They gave it a massive upgrade, and in my opinion, made it a very strong candidate to be just your main FR in general. Not only does it give a nice 50% cap up, you don't even need any other ranged attackers in your team to be getting good numbers from his FR. When it comes to the off turn, you don't really need to worry about anything else. He takes care of it mostly himself. Every single time Lancet triggers, you're going to be getting 20%. Having that trigger every single turn, that's a pretty big markup. He could be the only ranged off-turn attacker in your entire team, and you can still use his FR. That's how versatile it is. Next, I want to talk about his complete evasion while he's in mid-air. Again, you know, the true evasion thing. It's a bit more of a weirder pro, but you can have strategies where if you have a lock call, you can set up that call right before Kain jumps. All of the enemies will be targeting Kain, and guess what? Since he's in mid-air, no one can hit him. Next, if you have his BT active, like I said before, it's not super necessary, but if you do have it, you're going to be enjoying pretty high self HP cap ups. You know, in total for his BT, you're going to be getting 50% for himself. His FR gives another 50%. Remember that his overhead also gives a 20% cap up. So with his BT and FR active, you're getting a 120% cap up for himself. Lastly, with this pro, it's a bit more of a understated pro in my opinion. Some might even argue that this isn't a pro to begin with. I think it is a pro because he only has one framed buff for himself. The fact that that's all he has gives room to have other party members give him more buffs. And I think having 5 available slots for your party to work with, it gives you a lot of freedom on what kind of effects you can give Kain. Pretty nice. Now, on the downsides of Kain, I'll be honest, there really aren't a lot of him. Overall, he's just a very, very solid character. These cons are still downsides in my opinion, but I really had to nitpick in order to fill the con section in this should you pull. He can't do back-to-back launching with just one turn. You have to use up at least 2 turns, one for the LD, another one for the jump. So if your BT effect is active, you're gonna have to end up wasting 2 BT turns. It's not the worst thing in the world, you're only using 2 turns. Second off, when he does jump, he doesn't fulfill the FR completely. You're not gonna be fulfilling the launch condition. You're not gonna be fulfilling the breaking or attacking a broken target, the biggest FR condition with 50%. You're just gonna be getting 20 when Kain jumps. It's not completely horrible because it's only on his turn. If the enemy ends up taking turns, you could compensate for that FR number decrease. But overall, very, very nice upgrade for people who already already have him built, such as myself. Is it worth to pity his BT? I don't really think so. I think if you want to BT pity someone, definitely do it to someone else, not Kain. But if you're a newer player and you need good units to build your roster, Kain up to his FR, or if you just want to get his BT in general, will serve your teams well. So those are my should you pulls for everyone. Thank you guys so much for watching with me. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!